if you're, I don't know, around my age or older, you'll know that for the last couple of decades, there were really two prominent atheist names that were kind of sneering at Christianity. One of them was Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you recognize that name, Ron?
Yeah.
We actually had him when I worked on the morning show in Chicago as a producer. We actually had him on the morning show on Moody's radio. Yeah, it was fascinating. We did a little debate. He had written a book slamming Christianity or something. Really interesting. He passed away of cancer, tragically. I read a book and heard some stories about perhaps he at least heard the gospel and may have been considering it in his final days. Lord willing, he did make that decision for Christ. The other big name that was the atheist sneering at Christians is Richard Dawkins.
Right.
You recognize the name?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is it something you recognize, Daria?
Mm-hmm.
You see, I don't, I'm not young anymore, but I just assumed that kind of he was just for the old fuddy-duddies like Ron and me. But
I mean, his reputation kind of precedes itself.
Yeah, he's an evolutionary biologist. He's an outspoken critic of creationism and intelligent design. In 2006, he wrote a book called The God Delusion, where he just basically, his thesis, let me summarize it in Brian language. If you believe in this Christianity thing or God thing, you're a complete idiot. Hear me? I'm going to write a whole book about it.
Right.
And then we go to this Josh Moody event at Bedford Church of the Nazarene, and I'm sitting there minding my own business. Actually, this time minding my own business.
Okay. Take your word for it.
I can attest he actually was.
I was sitting right by you, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
And Pastor Moody mentioned Richard Dawkins as something he said, and I almost didn't believe it, were it not for the fact that I believe Pastor Moody. Richard Dawkins said something truly shocking, if you know who he is. He was interviewed recently with LBC in London. I don't know what LBC is, but it's something in London. And here's what he said. I do think we are a culturally a Christian country, referring to Great Britain. I call myself a cultural Christian.
Okay.
I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and a cultural Christian. I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. And I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all of our cathedrals or our beautiful parish churches. He went on to add that if he had to choose between Christianity and Islam, he would choose Christianity every single time.
Right.
He says, quote, "It seems to me to be a fundamentally decent religion in a way that I think Islam is not."
Okay.
20 years ago, I don't think Richard Dawkins would have been caught anywhere calling himself a cultural Christian.
Probably not.
He was one of the top sneerers.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been seen as some sort of capitulation because he thought religion was horrible for society. But look at him. He loves it. Somehow his heart is softened to Christianity.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting about what it is something about what it means to live the Christian life. It wasn't a debate that got Richard Dawkins.
Of course not.
Well, you say, of course not. What do you mean?
People are stubborn, and they're going to believe what they believe. And people very rarely change their minds until life circumstances force them to. You telling them you're wrong, here's facts, will almost never change someone's mind.
Right.
And yet that has been the primary strategy taught to Christians for decades. I've been to little conferences when I was younger. Here's how you win a debate against the atheists. Read this book, Win a Debate Against the Atheists. It's good to have those answers, I think, understanding. But
how about winning their hearts?
Yes.
That's seen as soft, Daria. I'm sorry.
I don't think God has debates in heaven. I think God has souls.
Yeah, I like how you put that. Another individual, there was a big lament about society and where we've gone, written by self-described agnostic Derek Thompson for The Atlantic, which The Atlantic has been really interesting lately. I thought they've been doing a great job. Here's what he wrote. As an agnostic, I've spent most of my life thinking about the decline of faith in America in mostly positive terms. Organized religion seemed to me beset by scandal and entangled in noxious politics. So, I thought, what is there really to mourn? Only in the past few years have I come around to a different view. Maybe religion, for all of its faults, works a bit like a retaining wall to hold back the destabilizing pressure of American hyper-individualism. which threatens to swell and spill over in its absence. It took decades for America to lose religion. It might take decades to understand the entirety of what we lost.
Mhm.
Who would have thought an agnostic would say such things?
Right. Very interesting. But I agree with what Daria said. We've been attacking them rather than trying to win them by love. You know, love your neighbor, love your enemies. Scripture doesn't seem to enforce the idea of you can beat them down with facts and theories, and then they'll come whimpering to Christ.
No.
We also forget, though, that people who aren't saved are not our enemies. They are
Yep.
lost souls just like we were and still would be if not for the grace of God.
And yet,
Mhm.
how many of us, to bring some things full circle, are ready to, on our social media accounts, condemn the idiots,
Mm-hmm.
slam the things we disagree with? When, look at this. It's the way Christians live that's compelling world-renowned atheists and agnostics.
Yeah.
To soften.
And the beauty of their architecture, of all things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I am relieved in many senses. This is kind of the train we've been riding on for a while. It's like, calm down, let's stop fighting, let's start living out, love God, love your neighbor. I mean, really, somebody asked Jesus, what's the most important thing? And he really made it that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The more I study Scripture, the more I love Jesus, the more it really is that simple. Love God, love your neighbor. Everything will fall into place.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's at least what Jesus said.
Amen.
6:57, we got more coming up here. In fact, we're not too far away from another story of somebody who said he hated church people. But some church people won him over. And I can guarantee they didn't do it by yelling at him.